Ladies and gentlemen, before we step into this moment, I want you to prepare your spirit because today's message is not just another motivational thought. This is a prophetic charge. There is a realm of insight, a realm of divine foresight that God makes available to those who are willing to rise above the noise of the world and listen with intention. And as we stand on the edge of another Friday, another doorway into breakthrough, victory, and divine alignment, I want you to understand that you are not stepping into this day as a bystander. You are stepping into it as a strategist, as a warrior, as someone who refuses to let the enemy dictate the narrative of your life. This is your moment to see beyond the natural, to anticipate what heaven has already arranged, and to step boldly into the future before your enemies even realize what God is about to do through you. When you wake up on a Friday, you are not simply entering another day. You are stepping into a divine appointment that heaven has orchestrated long before the foundation of the world. Every Friday carries a prophetic significance because it represents closure, fulfillment, completion, and the preparation for what's about to unfold in the days ahead. Friday is not the end of a week. Friday is the gateway into your next dimension. It is a day when cycles shift, when assignments culminate, when victories are sealed, and when your next breakthrough begins stirring beneath the surface. That is why you cannot allow this day to just arrive without speaking into it. You cannot afford to allow Friday to form itself based on random circumstances or external pressures. You must speak into Friday before the enemy does, because the enemy studies patterns, observes cycles, and seeks entry points in the moments when you are silent. Silence is a language, and when you are silent, something else will speak. Something else will decide the tone of your day. Something else will define your pace. Something else will influence your emotions, decisions, and spiritual posture. That's why you must stand up with authority and speak intentionally, loudly, boldly, and prophetically into the atmosphere of your Friday, sealing what God has promised, declaring what aligns with heaven, and shutting every unauthorized voice out of your day. There is power in being the first voice in the atmosphere. There is power in being the one who sets the tone, frames the environment, and commands the narrative. The enemy waits for the unguarded morning, the unspoken moment, the unattended opening where your voice should have been. The enemy is not creative, but he is strategic, and he seeks to plant suggestions, whispers, anxieties, and distractions into the empty spaces of your day. He watches for the gaps where you have not taken spiritual authority. If you do not speak into your Friday, he will attempt to infiltrate it. If you do not declare victory, he will try to declare defeat. If you do not prophesy progress, he will try to sow stagnation. If you do not command clarity, he will attempt to introduce confusion. This is why you rise with purpose, with intentionality, and with dominion, understanding that your words are not casual expressions. They are spiritual legislation. When you speak, you legislate the atmosphere. When you speak, you authorize activity in the unseen realm. When you speak, you establish boundaries that the enemy cannot cross. When you speak, you become the gatekeeper of your own destiny, the commander of your own day. Every Friday has an assignment, and your words determine whether you unlock it or miss it. So many people walk through Fridays unaware that heaven has been waiting for them to speak. They treat the day casually, forgetting that spiritual laws are always in motion. Just because you are not speaking doesn't mean something isn't being spoken. Just because you are not declaring doesn't mean something isn't being declared. Just because you are not commanding doesn't mean something isn't trying to command you. When you remain silent, you give permission to the wrong things, and the enemy thrives on permissions you never intended to grant. That is why you must rise knowing that your Friday responds to your voice. Your Friday is waiting for your decrees. Your Friday is shaped by what you say in the first moments of the morning. Words are seeds, and Friday is the soil that receives those seeds and multiplies them throughout the day. If you plant strength, you receive strength. If you plant peace, you receive peace. If you plant clarity, you receive clarity. If you plant faith, you receive faith multiplied. But if you do not plant anything, the environment will plant something for you, and the enemy is always looking for unguarded soil. This is why you must speak with authority. not hesitantly, not quietly, not passively, but with the boldness of someone who knows who they are in God. When you speak into Friday, you are not suggesting, you are commanding, you are not hoping, you are declaring, you are not wishing, you are activating. Heaven responds to faith-filled speech, not to passive thoughts. The enemy tries to outrun you by speaking first because he knows that the first word often becomes the strongest stronghold. That is why discouragement tries to greet you early. That is why worry tries to wake up before you do. That is why negativity tries to whisper before you even begin your day. The enemy is attempting to get ahead of your declaration, to claim the territory of your Friday before you step into it. But you must rise with a spiritual aggression that says, no, I will speak first. No, I will take authority early. No, I will fill this atmosphere before anything else tries to occupy it. When you speak into Friday before the enemy does, you are not merely making statements, you are executing divine strategy. You are walking in prophetic intelligence. You are operating with the understanding that the spiritual realm responds to initiative. The enemy reacts, but God's people are called to initiate. The enemy manipulates, but God's people legislate. The enemy suggests, but God's people decree. When you take initiative with your words, you disrupt every demonic cycle that has been trying to repeat itself in your life. You interrupt every pattern of delay, disappointment, distraction, and sabotage. You break the influence of anything that has been trying to attach itself to your days. You shut down every familiar spirit that tries to recycle old battles, old emotions, old fears, and old burdens. By speaking, you break cycles. By speaking, you establish new cycles. By speaking, you align your Friday with heaven's blueprint rather than the enemy's agenda. Friday is a prophetic day because it marks the culmination of everything that has happened throughout the week. It is where victories settle, where outcomes crystallize, and where seeds sown earlier in the week begin to manifest. The enemy knows that if he can disrupt your Friday, he can disrupt your momentum. He knows that if he can plant fear on Friday, he can weaken your weekend. He knows that if he can confuse you on Friday, he can distract you from the spiritual reset that Saturday and Sunday are meant to bring. Friday is the enemy's prime target because it is a day of spiritual transition. And in transitions, whoever speaks first often takes control. That is why you must get ahead of the enemy in your speech. You must step into Friday with the mindset of a general taking command of a battlefield before the adversary even arrives. You speak early, speak boldly, and speak with unwavering confidence that heaven backs every word you decree. When you speak with authority into your Friday, you step out of the role of a passive participant and into the role of an active architect. You realize that your day is not something that happens to you, it is something you co-create with your words. You begin to shift your posture from reaction to creation, from survival to mastery, from drifting to dominion. You awaken the part of you that God designed to rule, to establish, to uproot, and to build. You awaken the prophetic force within you that understands that your life rises or falls to the level of your declarations. You awaken the awareness that speaking is not optional, it is essential. It is your spiritual weapon, your legal right, your divine authority. And on a Friday, this weapon becomes even more critical because the end of a week is where strategies are completed and new strategies begin forming in the unseen realm. If you do not speak, the enemy will speak for you. If you do not command, the enemy will attempt to command over you. If you do not take authority, the atmosphere will be influenced by forces that do not align with God's purpose for your life. When you speak into Friday before the enemy does, you are also reclaiming time. Time itself responds to the authority of your words. Time is not neutral. It is designed to submit to divine intention. When you speak, you are pulling the day into alignment. You are calling forth favor, calling forth strength, calling forth clarity, calling forth productivity, calling forth breakthroughs, calling forth opportunities, calling forth divine appointments, calling forth angelic support, calling forth protection against every plot, scheme, trap, snare, and strategy of the adversary. You are speaking into the hours before the enemy tries to contaminate them with confusion, hesitation, or intimidation. You are declaring that every hour of your Friday shall serve your purpose. You are declaring that every conversation, every decision, every interaction, and every assignment will move you closer to destiny. You are declaring that no weapon formed against you will prosper because you have already spoken into the day with the authority that renders every weapon powerless. As you speak into Friday, you are also reinforcing your identity. You are reminding yourself who you are and whose you are. You are awakening your spirit to the truth that you are not a victim of circumstance, but a vessel of divine intention. When you begin your Friday by speaking life, strength, peace, and victory, you silence every internal voice that tries to sabotage your progress. You silence the doubts that try to resurface. You silence the fears that try to creep in unnoticed. You silence the memories of past failures that try to echo into your present. You silence every insecurity that attempts to diminish your confidence. Your words become a shield, a barrier, and a fortress around your mind, emotions, and spirit. You begin to realize that speaking is not just about shaping the environment. It is about shaping yourself. It is about awakening your faith, igniting your courage, stabilizing your emotions, and aligning your heart with God's purpose. When you speak into your Friday before the enemy does, you are stepping into spiritual maturity. You are acknowledging that life is spiritual, that time is spiritual, that patterns are spiritual, and that adversaries operate in spiritual dimensions long before things manifest in the natural. You begin to understand that speaking is not a ritual. It is warfare. It is strategy. It is preparation. It is intervention. It is protection. And more than anything, it is partnership with God. When you speak, you are partnering with heaven. When you speak, you are synchronizing your life with divine timing. When you speak, you are activating the power God placed within you. When you speak, you are establishing yourself in victory before the battle even begins. Friday becomes a day of triumph because you have already spoken triumph into it. Friday becomes a day of breakthrough because you have already declared breakthrough over it. Friday becomes a day of clarity because you have already commanded the confusion to scatter. Friday becomes a day of favor because you have already positioned yourself under the open heavens through your declarations. This is why you speak. This is why you take authority. This is why you open your mouth before the enemy opens his. Because your words carry the weight of heaven. Your words reshape reality. Your words close gates the enemy tries to enter. Your words open doors heaven has ordained. Your words silence the voices that oppose your destiny. Your words summon the forces that support your assignment. You speak into Friday because Friday is too important to be left unspoken. You speak into Friday because the enemy is always looking for a first word, and you must ensure that the first word belongs to you. You speak into Friday because God has given you the authority to declare, decree, legislate, establish, and command. You speak into Friday because your life responds to your voice, your future responds to your voice, your breakthrough responds to your voice, and Friday itself is waiting for you to speak with the authority heaven has placed inside you. When you step into a Friday, you are not merely transitioning into the end of a week, you are stepping into a moment where your words have the power to align or misalign everything that follows. Friday is a day that exposes whether you have been intentional in your declarations or whether you have allowed the atmosphere to shape itself without your influence. And when your words do not rise early, the enemy seeks to fill the silence. He looks for the moments where your voice is absent, where your intention has not yet been spoken, where your spiritual authority has not yet been exercised. That is why you must align your words with divine intention before the adversary plants any seed of confusion. Confusion does not arrive fully grown. It begins as a seed. It begins as a whisper. It begins as a thought that enters the mind quietly, unnoticed, disguised as something harmless. If you do not intentionally speak alignment, the enemy subtly introduces misalignment. If you do not declare clarity, he introduces doubt. If you do not command order, he introduces disorder. If you do not guard your mind with your words, he attempts to invade it with distractions, accusations, and distortions. Your words become the first line of defense and the first act of creation. Words shape perception, and perception shapes decisions. Decisions shape outcomes, and outcomes shape destiny. This is why aligning your words early is not optional. It is essential. It is required. It is part of the eternal principle that life and death are in the power of the tongue. If life is not spoken into your Friday, something else will attempt to speak death into it. If purpose is not declared, something else will attempt to introduce confusion. If peace is not spoken, anxiety will attempt to creep in quietly. If confidence is not proclaimed, insecurity will attempt to rise. Your words do not simply express your reality, they establish it. Therefore, you cannot step into a Friday without intentional articulation. You cannot walk into a new day casually. You cannot assume that because the day is calm, it is spiritually empty. Every day carries spiritual activity, and words determine what is permitted and what is prohibited. When your words are aligned with divine intention, you create a covering over your Friday. You create a shield, a spiritual force field that repels anything that does not belong. Your declarations become the filter through which everything must pass. What does not align with divine purpose cannot penetrate your day when you have already declared alignment. But when you remain silent, your Friday becomes open territory. Silence gives the enemy an invitation. Silence allows unauthorized voices to speak. Silence gives room to confusion, and confusion is not loud at first. Confusion does not arrive with chaos, it arrives with subtlety. It begins as uncertainty. It begins as hesitation. It begins as something small, but small seeds produce large harvests when left unattended. The enemy is patient. He understands the power of gradual infiltration. He knows that if he can plant one wrong thought early enough, your entire day can be misaligned. One wrong thought can create emotional instability. One wrong assumption can create relational conflict. One wrong perception can create fear. One wrong memory can trigger discouragement. And all of this can happen because words were not spoken to guard your mind. This is why alignment requires intention. You cannot align your words accidentally. You cannot wait for the day to dictate your declarations. You speak before the day speaks to you. You speak before circumstances arise. You speak before emotions shift. You speak before challenges appear, because the purpose of alignment is to ensure that when challenges do arise, they encounter a mind that has already been fortified by truth. They encounter a heart that has already been strengthened by declaration. They encounter a spirit that has already been anchored in identity. When you align your words early, the enemy loses his access point. By the time he attempts to plant confusion, the soil has already been claimed. There is no room for his seeds because your words have already occupied the ground. You have already spoken clarity, peace, strength, and direction. You have already declared divine order. You have already sealed your day with purpose, and anything contrary has no legal right to remain. Your words must come into alignment not only with your desires, but with divine intention. Because desire without divine alignment is vulnerable. Desire without spiritual authority is unstable. Desire without direction can lead you into cycles of frustration. Divine intention is the blueprint, the spiritual map, the heaven-ordained pattern for your day. When you align your words with divine intention, you stop reacting to life and begin partnering with heaven. You begin to declare what has already been established in the unseen realm. You begin to call forth what is already yours. You begin to activate spiritual support that cannot be accessed through silence. Heaven responds to words that mirror its intention. Angels respond to decrees that align with divine purpose. Spiritual power responds to speech that agrees with what God has already spoken over your life. Your words become the bridge between divine intention and earthly manifestation. Without that bridge, even what has been ordained cannot fully emerge. Words give birth to what heaven is ready to release. The enemy understands the power of alignment, which is why his greatest strategy is misalignment. He does not need to destroy you. He only needs to misalign you. He does not need to create chaos. He only needs to shift perspective. He does not need to block your blessing. He only needs to distort your vision so you cannot recognize it. Confusion is the enemy's weapon of choice because confusion slows movement. Confusion weakens confidence. Confusion creates double-mindedness. And a double-minded person cannot walk in clarity, cannot move in faith, cannot stand in authority. Confusion brings instability, and instability brings stagnation. When you are confused, you hesitate. When you hesitate, you lose momentum. When you lose momentum, opportunities pass. And the root of that entire chain reaction may have been silence at the beginning of your Friday. That is why you must speak early. You must speak clearly. You must speak intentionally. You must speak with a conviction that leaves no room for the adversary to insert his voice. The spiritual realm recognizes authority. When you speak in alignment with divine intention, your words carry a frequency that commands recognition. Darkness cannot remain where authority has been declared. Confusion cannot survive where clarity has been spoken. Fear cannot attach itself where courage has been decreed. Doubt cannot grow where faith has been established. You are not simply speaking to your day. You are speaking to the atmosphere surrounding your day. You are speaking to the spiritual currents that try to flow against you. You are speaking to the forces that attempt to influence your emotions. You are speaking to the thoughts that try to challenge your identity. You are speaking to the unseen realm and announcing that you are in alignment with divine intention. When your words are aligned, your mind becomes aligned. And when your mind is aligned, your decisions follow. When your decisions align, your actions become bold. When your actions align, your outcomes reflect purpose. This is the power of aligning your words early. You create a chain reaction that moves you toward destiny rather than away from it. Many people underestimate the significance of morning declarations because they do not realize the spiritual consistency of the enemy. He does not take breaks. He does not rest. He does not stop trying to influence your day. But your words, when spoken with authority, override his influence. Your alignment becomes a shield. It becomes a framework. It becomes the operating system of your life. Your Friday becomes a place of clarity rather than confusion, peace rather than chaos, strength rather than weakness, confidence rather than insecurity. When you align your words with divine intention, you also protect the divine timing for your life. Words shift timing. Words accelerate or delay. Words open or close. When you declare alignment, you position yourself in the precise moment heaven has ordained. You remove delay. You silence distraction. You resist detours. The enemy tries to plant confusion not merely to disrupt your thoughts, but to disrupt your timing. If you are confused, you move slower. If you are confused, you hesitate. If you hesitate, you miss windows. But when your words align early, your timing aligns, you move in rhythm, you step into opportunities with confidence, you recognize divine appointments, you have the clarity to discern which doors to walk through and which to walk away from. Divine alignment brings divine discernment, and divine discernment brings divine timing. This is why you cannot let the enemy speak before you do. Every time he speaks first, he attempts to set the tone. He attempts to shift the narrative. He attempts to plant confusion where clarity should reign. But when you align your words first, you silence him. You interrupt his access. You disrupt his strategies. You dismantle his plans. Your words become a spiritual barricade that confusion cannot penetrate. And confusion does not need permission to enter. It only needs an opening. Silence is an opening. Hesitation is an opening. Doubt is an opening. But when your words rise early, you close the openings, you fortify your mind, you anchor your spirit, you secure your emotions, you align yourself with divine purpose in a way that makes confusion powerless. There is a reason divine intention requires vocal alignment. Words are the currency of the spiritual realm. Words activate, words authorize, words establish, words secure, words